Good afternoon, and welcome to the Boise Metro Chamber's Legislative Update Series. I'm Tori Thomas, Community and Government Affairs Manager here at the Boise Metro Chamber and your host for today's event. The Boise Metro Chamber is Idaho's only five-star accredited chamber and represents nearly 2,000 members. We are only able to provide current events and educational content because of our members and their investment in our community. Before I introduce our panelists for today, I'd like to thank Optum Idaho for their generous support. Please enjoy this quick video from our sponsor.
Our overall health is affected by our minds and our bodies. Optum's Hello Idaho can help with both by providing Idahoans with free resources to support whole health. Learn more at optumidaho.com.
Alrighty, well, for today's legislative update, we have Alex Adams. Thanks so much for being here. I'll do a quick bio on you. Alex J. Adams is the administrator of the Idaho Division of Financial Management, overseeing the development and implementation of Idaho's $13 billion state budget. He also leads Governor Little's zero-based regulation executive order implementation. He holds a doctoral degree from the University of Toledo and a master's degree from Johns Hopkins University. Thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate your time.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Tori.
Yeah, of course. Well, before we dive into the specifics of the 2024 budget, any chance you could give us like a quick overview of how the budget process actually works?
Yeah, so a short way of saying it is the governor proposes and the legislature disposes. So the governor makes a budget recommendation each January, and then we work pretty closely with our partners in the legislature to bring that across the finish line. So budget process starts in earnest on September 1st. Every agency in the state submits their budget request to both the governor as well as the legislature. We work through it throughout the fall, as does the legislature. Governor makes a recommendation that balances the competing needs across all agencies, and that's what he debuted yesterday as part of the State of the State. Now it's the legislature's turn. I presented the budget to the Joint Appropriations Committee this morning. They'll spend the next 2 to 3 months, combing through every budget, looking at every recommendation, and bringing forth the legislature's budget that they'll present to the governor to sign into law.
Awesome. Thank you for simplifying that for myself and our audience. We appreciate it's definitely a tedious task, it seems like. So we appreciate all the work that goes into it. So
it's a fun task. It's not tedious. It's fun.
Okay, that's good. Well, we're happy you think so. Well, with that, we'll pull up your slides, and we'd love for you to get in on the breakdown and show us what's up for our state this year.
Yeah. So for the 4 people that tuned into JFAC this morning, I apologize. You'll see a little bit of duplication. But I thought maybe start off with talking what the governor's priorities were, reinforcing some of what he said in the State of the State yesterday, and then see what questions folks might have. So if you'd go to the first slide, wanted to set the stage and just say it was a different budget environment. If you followed state budgeting these last couple of years, you've heard a lot of $1 billion here, $1 billion there type of things thrown around because the state was sitting on a record surplus. We had revenue growing at 20% year over year in consecutive years, and we never thought that would be sustainable for a number of reasons. And that's proving to be the case. I mean, this year, the starting point as we put together this budget is we did not have a $1 billion surplus. We had a ending balance that we had left as a cushion for uncertainty. So we started off the year with about $400 million in the bank, which is just a fundamentally different starting point than we've had in recent years. Second is in recent years, there's been big packages of pandemic aid. We had the CARES Act, ARPA, IIJA, and others where there were big buckets of money to use for one-time capital infrastructure investments. That's no longer the case. ARPA is fully obligated as part of this budget. We have a couple reallocations that we're proposing, but didn't have that as part of our starting point. And then, as I said, we've had 20% year-over-year growth in recent years. Now we're missing on our forecast. We're kind of on the downward slope of revenue, and we've been running about 5% behind year to date. So we had to scale back some of what we were planning. And the governor said in the State of the State, this was a year of priorities. We couldn't do it all. but we had to pick those priorities that we felt most critical to the future of the state of Idaho. So if you go to the next slide, I won't dwell on this because this is kind of for the wonkier types who might be dialing in. But this shows our revenue growth, our general fund revenue growth in billions since 2018. And you can see we had that meteoric rise in revenue from 2020 to 2022. We went from 4 billion in revenue to 5 billion in revenue to 6 billion in revenue. And then you kind of see we're on the downward slope of that roller coaster. And that's primarily for two reasons. One is things cooling a little bit as pandemic aid doesn't course through the economy. But second, that downward slope is also the result of deliberate choices. We've cut income tax rates back to back to back years. And we did a sales tax transfer to put 330 million to K-12 and to put 80 million towards the In-Demand Careers Fund, which the governor used for the Idaho Launch Program, as well as some CTE items. So that's kind of the basis for the slope. So you can see we're building a budget for fiscal year 25. It's always confusing to talk fiscal years. State fiscal year 25 starts on July 1 of this year. So you can see for July 1 of 25, we're projecting hitting that upward slope, and we're projecting revenue of $5.7 billion. So that's what we're building the budget around. Of course, revenue forecasting is a really fancy way of saying guessing. You're trying to look into the future and forecast, what major economic trends are there going to be? What's the unemployment rate going to be? What's what are wages going to be? Is personal income going to continue to grow? What businesses are going to relocate to Idaho? Is Taylor Swift going to release a new album? You're looking at those major economic drivers to see how we expect to perform in the out years, and then you build a budget around what you expect in those out years, knowing that you might be above it, you might be below it. The risk is, frankly, pretty asymmetric. If we guess high on revenue and revenue comes in low, we have a balanced budget requirement as a state. So you have to cut spending mid-year. That means furloughs, layoffs, program reductions, things like that. However, if you guess low on revenue and it comes in high, that's when you have a surplus that you bring into the next session that can be used for capital infrastructure. So always keep in mind that the difference between federal and state budgeting is state is a balanced budget requirement. And as a result of that balanced budget requirement, where you set your revenue, which is your best guess based on evidence and based on trend lines, is going to determine everything else in terms of spending, in terms of priorities, and then in terms of how likely you are to meet your budget targets throughout the year. So if you go to the next slide, because forecasting is a fancy way of saying guessing, you will be wrong. It comes down to how wrong are you and in what direction. So fiscal prudence dictates that you hedge. Some of the ways we hedged in this budget is we limited general fund spending growth to just 2.2% year over year. That's our smallest budget increase since the Great Recession. So the governor made a deliberate choice to kind of smooth out spending and decrease the trajectory of growth. We also left ending balances at the end of the year of 314 million this year and 265 million next year. Just for context, for 25, that would be a 4.5% cushion. So theoretically, revenue could drop 4.5% below what we projected before you have to make any other decisions. That doesn't mean we wouldn't make other decisions. It just expands the ability of you to make the right decisions at the right time. And then the state has a rainy day fund, multiple rainy day funds, actually. And the governors tried to keep those rainy day funds at the maximum levels allowed under state law, so that if we do hit a recession, you have twin trends. You have spending increase during a recession because more people are on programs like Medicaid. At the same time, you have revenue cratering. So you want a rainy day fund to stabilize in those periods of economic recession. So that this budget would keep, under state law, our rainy day funds to the max. So if you go to the next slide, Couple things in this budget. First, there is tax relief in this budget. Last year, the legislature passed House Bill 292, which is a comprehensive property tax relief bill. Part of that was what they call a surplus eliminator. If revenue comes in above what we forecasted, the first $150 million above what was forecasted would go to additional property tax relief. So I think that's one of those important things for folks to know about this budget and why you pick the revenue target you do as well. So if you go to the next slide. The next thing that's in this budget, and the governor spoke quite a bit about this in the State of the State, one of the top priorities for this session is school facilities. Idaho is last in per pupil spending on facilities of any state in the country, and second to last on facility spending per square foot of school facilities. Governor gave examples of schools he's visited that are dilapidated. He visited one that literally had raw sewage seeping into a space underneath the cafeteria. I think there's an acknowledgement that the learning environment that students are in is pretty important and dictates a lot of the educational outcomes. And studies have been done to quantify the backlog on our facilities, one of which was done by the Office of Performance Evaluation by the legislature. So what we did is we calibrated a budget recommendation that we feel is responsive in part to the legislature's own report on school facilities, and have two recommendations. First is governor's recommending we put $125 million on to a school modernization trust fund, and that we would bond off of that. So $125 million annually would generate a bond of $1 billion over a 10-year period that could be sent out to school districts in some sort of formula basis so that they could use it for their major construction or major renovation needs. Also, the governor's recommending $75 million ongoing that can be used for maintenance. Maintenance is what's necessary to keep our buildings up and running, for HVAC, for plumbing, for roofing, for electrical, for sidewalks, the things that maybe don't grab headlines, but are pretty important to the environment that our students are learning in. And combined, so the $125 million for new construction and the $75 million for maintenance is a combo of $200 million a year. So over the next 10 years, we would be infusing $2 billion into school facilities. And as the governor said yesterday, a $2 billion investment in school facilities is $2 billion in property tax avoidance and property tax relief, because to the extent these projects are going to get funded otherwise, it's going to be on local bonds or levies that hit property taxpayers. So we're leveraging the revenue growth in the state and the state's financial position that we found ourselves in to turn around and defray local property taxes while accomplishing a twofer by getting a substantial investment in school facilities out of this. This would be inclusive of all public schools, including charter schools. There's some charter specific recommendations as part of that. So it is a comprehensive package that the governor's recommending. If you go to the next slide, last year, Governor Little spearheaded a game-changing program for Idaho youth called Idaho Launch. And what that is if you graduate from an Idaho high school, there's an $8,000 grant available to you to go to any post-secondary program in the state. The state has historically funded scholarships for four-year universities. This would expand it to any workforce training program, industry credentials, apprenticeship programs, and things that do lead to in-demand careers including healthcare, IT, engineering, welding, linemen, farm tech, things like that. We thought, part of what the governor was trying to accomplish, state for years has been chasing a 60% go-on rate. We want 60% of Idaho high school graduates to go on to post-secondary education. And during the pandemic, our go-on rate dropped to 38%. The state's, in fact, never hit the 60% go on rate. I guess never might be a strong word, but I'm not aware of a data point that shows in recent years that the state has hit 60% go on rate. So we set aside this money thinking it would be a multi-year process to get enough applicants to have interest in launch to pursue it. We have enough funding for about 10,000 high school graduates to go on. And through December, we already had 12,500 applicants. And applications continue to roll in through May. So pretty significant demand. It's catalyzed a lot of conversations about what students should pursue after high school that might not have happened otherwise. It's prompted a lot of conversations with parents, parental figures, guidance counselors, career advisors, etc. And one of the things we're really excited about is this is bringing a lot of programs that perhaps haven't been funded post-secondary, welding, electrical, CDLs, things like that, into the fray, because there's dignity in work, there's dignity in all professions, and getting students to think comprehensively about what their career options are and starting those conversations early is something that's pretty important. Because we thought it would take a couple of years to build up that demand, when launch passed, we had a provision in the bill where unused dollars from high school graduates could roll over into a fund that could be used for adult learners. So think of a cashier who wants to come back to be a phlebotomist as one example. But based on the demand we're seeing, it's pretty clear that there's not going to be a rollover fund for adults. So what we did is we have an organization called DOPL. It's one of our agencies that oversees all the licensing boards. So licensing for physicians, nursing, medicine, electrical, shorthand reporters, outfitters, and guides. Those that have fund balances above 125%, we would take their fines and fees and push it over to a targeted program for adult workers, to help provide grants to adult workers who are trying to upskill or reskill into in-demand professions where there's a significant number of job openings in the state of Idaho. So workforce development is a priority of the governor. We appreciate how your chamber has engaged in that issue in the past. And governor has pretty serious workforce development package with launch through both of these programs that we hope to get across the finish line this legislative session. So if you go to the next slide, please. Transportation is probably the number one complaint any of us here around the state as we have in-migration and a growing population. If you've ever complained about traffic, if you've ever complained about congestion on your commute home, boy, do we have a package for you. Governor's recommending $200 million for local bridges. A couple of years back, we had commissioned a study of how many bridges we had that were structurally poor, deficient, or impeding farm trucks getting to market, things like that. It was a $600 million backlog. We've already cleared out $400 million of the backlog. This would be the final tranche and get us across the finish line to get those bridges up to snuff. And there's a grant program that has rated all of the bridges across the state. So chances are in your county, in your neck of the woods, wherever you're watching, there's a bridge that is currently being upgraded or is on the list to be upgraded as a result of these grants. And then at the bottom, we have kind of a wonky program called TECM, which is a fancy way of saying we're taking a portion of sales tax and bonding off of it to generate additional dollars for transportation. I think there's an acknowledgement federally that transportation has had too much of a reliance on gas tax, which probably historically served us well. But as you get more fuel economy and more electric vehicles, the return on the gas tax is going to continue to diminish over time. So states have had to get creative about how they fund transportation. And our governor said no new taxes, no new fees. So as we've had revenue growth, we've been trying to bottle some of that revenue growth, bonding off of it so that we can clear out some of the capacity of high value projects. So if you go to the next slide, a couple things for natural resources that I'll highlight. Growing state, a lot of Western states have not planned for their growth and have had significant water issues. Over the last couple of years, we've put over $1 billion into water systems, drinking systems, wastewater systems, sewer systems, surface and subsurface storage. This is building off of what the governor has done in recent years, where he's proposing another $30 million that would go to the water board in Idaho to prioritize projects that are high value that will help Idaho maintain sovereignty over its water supply in the years ahead. Also recommending $20 million for outdoor rec. Many Idaho families rediscovered their love of the outdoors during the pandemic, and many of our parks were overrun. So we've been trying to clear out their deferred maintenance backlog and expand capacity so that there's more parking, there's more yurts, there's more cabins, there's more day use areas, so that Idahoans can enjoy more of what they love, the great outdoors. And then my guess is some of your watchers have followed what has happened with our quagga mussel response in the Magic Valley. Governor did not want to pinch pennies in this area. We committed the resources necessary to finish off the fight so that this doesn't have significant ramifications for economic development, hydro, and other things. So we've got $6.6 million in the budget to help us continue to combat invasive species like quagga mussels in the Snake River. Next slide. So just to kind of put a bow on it and summarize, education is top priority, $200 million annually for school facilities. Workforce development, $75 million for Idaho launch. Increase our investments in transportation by increasing our bonding capacity and clearing out the backlog of local bridges in need of repair. Investments in natural resources, and then said tax relief. As I said, investments in school facilities are an investment in property tax relief. So $200 million annually, $2 billion over the next 10 years in property tax relief and avoidance. All while, and I say this so that your listeners can have confidence that it is a fiscally prudent budget. Left ending balances more than $250 million each year, maxed out our rainy day funds, and ensured structural balance so that our ongoing revenue is in line with our ongoing spending. So that if you've read about other states like California, New York, Arizona, where they're dealing with deficits this legislative session, we're avoiding what the folly of what other states have done with their budgets in recent years. So with that, Tori, hopefully that sparked some questions, and see if there's anything you were hoping to discuss that I didn't cover.
That was really great. Thank you so much. It was really great information for myself, and I'm sure our viewers as well. All of those priorities in the budget really align well with the Chamber's priorities. So we're excited to continue this session with everyone and see where all of this goes regarding the budget. So a quick question that I had, and then we can open it up. And if the audience has anything, please comment below and we can try to get to them. But, talking about all the priorities, like I mentioned, it's definitely something that all of our chamber members, all of those topics, especially education and tax relief, that's a huge thing that the chamber keeps in mind. But out of those priorities, what do you see our members really wanting to be focused on, or what do you think they'll be most interested in as we head into this session and into the fiscal year?
Yeah, I guess, it was a year of priorities, and certainly, in any budget, there's thousands of decision units. So if there's something I didn't cover today, it shouldn't be interpreted that it's not a priority. It's just where we're going to be spending our limited time and energy as a governor's office and budget team. Facilities, launch, transportation, natural resources. So glad to hear that the Venn diagram overlaps with your priorities. I know your new director well, for better or worse. I worked with her for many years, so look forward to enlisting her into the fight and into some of these priorities. But I think with anyone out there, the Capitol can certainly become an echo chamber. So the more they hear from folks back home, the better. So to the extent workforce development is a continued priority of the sure that your local representatives know that launch is being successful, know that the students in your area have applied for it and are leveraging it to go on to in-demand careers that they might not have pursued otherwise, making sure they hear that message. Facilities is a big lift. If there's school districts in your area that have specific needs, don't be shy about pointing those out to your legislators or to us. I think the more concrete the examples, the better.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I think that's something that even I miss out, or you don't think about just reaching out to people, and they want to hear from you. They want to hear your complaints, but they also want to hear your thank yous and where you need more assistance or more funding. So we appreciate that guidance from you as well. So it looks like we have a question from Valley Regional Transit about public transit. Is there any topic or conversation of that, or do you feel like that'll be a conversation in this session that we have?
I don't know that I've heard any overarching discussion about it from the legislature on it. In terms of where we had to put our limited priorities on the table, clearing out and finishing off the fight on local bridges was priority one, and then additional bonding for surface transportation was priority two. So again, just because I didn't highlight something doesn't mean it's not a priority. I can't remember what's in ITD's budget in terms of federal grants for transit or whatnot, but where we're putting our effort for transportation this session was bridges and then the additional tech and bonding.
Awesome. Thank you. And then you did mention Medicaid just a little bit. Can you expand on that just a little bit on the Medicaid spending, or if you have any details on that?
Yeah, so it was kind of an interesting year for Medicaid. So during the pandemic, the feds covered an additional 6% of our budget for Medicaid that otherwise the state would have had to have covered. But the catch to get that extra 6%, you're to carry a bunch of additional beneficiaries on Medicaid that otherwise didn't meet the state eligibility criteria. That pandemic aid wore off, and therefore the state had to go through a redetermination process and determine who was on Medicaid that shouldn't have been moving forward. And the number of lives that cycled off of Medicaid as a result dropped the budget pretty substantially for Medicaid. So the budget from fiscal year 24 to 25 on the state's general fund is relatively flat. There's been chatter at the legislature over the last couple of years about relitigating Medicaid expansion. There's been chatter about looking at different models like managed care, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know which direction it's going to go this session, but we submitted a relatively flat budget year over year, primarily because of the redetermination. But we did a couple things with the budget. There are some high priority provider rate adjustments that were necessary. And then the governor was supportive of expanding coverage for women postpartum on Medicaid. So both of those were built into that budget. They were offset by an assessment as well as using some of the Millennium Fund dollars, which were the tobacco settlement dollars, and using those to pay down the state share of Medicaid, given the number of tobacco cessation services that are provided under Medicaid.
Awesome. Thank you for diving into that a little bit. So we have a thank you. Appreciate the extension of support for in-demand tech careers, which Idaho sorely needs to retain a workforce for our local industries. There are many lucrative careers that don't require a four-year degree, and this can help reduce the pressure to incur student loan debt. Also, kudos for considering adult learners. So thank you, Danny. We had another.
That was a comment, not a question, but Danny, I really appreciate you saying that. I mean, you captured in a much more brief paragraph than what we were trying to accomplish with the launch program. So you nailed it, and appreciate your acknowledgement of that. And don't be shy about letting folks know why investments like that are needed.
Yeah, we appreciate, Danny. That was great. I think I'm going to copy that, and we'll quote you later. We had another question asking how is the legislature leveraging artificial intelligence to increase productivity and efficiencies, if you are aware.
Manny, it's a great question. I don't know that I am the person to answer that. I don't know what technology the legislature is using or not using this year. I work on the executive branch side. And I would say it's a little out of my wheelhouse to be commenting on artificial intelligence, but I see the potential for it in the future. I don't know that I'm the best position to speak to it.
I don't know if anyone really is these days. I don't mind a ChatGPT. I did have ChatGPT write my sister a birthday note the other day, and it turned out pretty funny. It definitely needs to tell it was a robot, but
maybe we'll try it for the budget next year.
Yep, just only put it in and just see what comes out of it. Yeah. Okay, we have another question. Can you expand on the $2 billion facilities bond tax relief twofer? Whose idea?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Cool. Thanks, Wyatt. Well, in terms of whose idea, I think any idea has 1,000 parents, right? I mean, this is something that's been talked about for decades and litigated to some extent in Idaho. If you ask me what the most pressing thing that prompted the governor to take a proactive role in it was last year, the legislature put out a report from the Office of Performance Evaluations highlighting the state of school facilities in Idaho and where we stand relative to our sister states. So I would say that kind of created the impetus to let's do something. And then the governor visits a lot of schools. I was with him when he toured the Salmon School District, and to say the building is dilapidated, I think the students literally have to cross a street, which is a highway for Salmon, to use the bathroom. And they're kind of in modular units. The floors are catawampus. The literally raw sewage was seeping into the cafeteria. And all of us joked about how bad the food in our cafeteria was growing up. But I am not using hyperbole when I say there was literally raw sewage into the cafeteria. So, I think seeing that need, seeing that demand, knowing that buildings matter, knowing that the learning environment matters for children, that was the impetus. So the $2 billion twofer, as I said, there's kind of two recommendations. $125 million annually that would be apportioned to each district in every county throughout the state for new construction and new renovation. And then $75 million for maintenance, so maintaining those buildings and ensuring that they don't fall into a state of disrepair moving forward. So $200 million total, $2 billion over a 10-year period, which the only other way to fund facilities, unless you're going to use state discretionary dollars, which generally go to operations, facility bonds or levies at the local level. So every dollar the state puts into facilities is a dollar that doesn't have to be taxed on property taxes at the local level, hence the twofer. I do anticipate this will be a pretty robust discussion throughout the legislative session, and the parameters will have to be worked out pretty carefully with our partners in the legislature. But depending on what formula you use, over that 10-year period, West Ada's caught, if you send it out just based on I think attendance alone, it was like 150 million. So, it's pretty serious resources for the school districts that they could use for the pressing needs that are decided locally by their locally elected school boards.
I think that's obviously a really great budget item. I think, the governor mentioned how much we all appreciate public education, and we're asking these teachers to be with our kids and take care of them and teach them and help them. And so an additional assistance and helping maintenance and things that maybe they can't focus on day to day is really helpful. So we appreciate that you all are looking at the maintenance side of things, and we just really appreciate all you do. And he said it yesterday, you guys really make it look so easy. We're all wondering what DC's up to. So it's true.
On the facilities deal, I mean, I guess maybe just one other thing to provide a little bit of context. Governor did convene a task force in 2019 called Our Kids, Idaho's Future, and it included stakeholders from many different industries. And Maslow's hierarchy of need, we had to start with the people in the building. We got starting teacher pay up so that we could recruit good teachers. We then passed a career ladder to keep our good teachers in Idaho. We put money into health insurance so that in addition to salaries, we had good benefits for our teachers. We put quite a bit of money last year to classified staff so that those critical support staff who really make your schools run are taken care of and well supported. We've put discretionary dollars so that schools have operational dollars to provide good learning, good curriculum and learning opportunities. So facilities was kind of like the last part of that Our Kids, Idaho's Future task force as well. So between that and then the legislature's own report on school facilities, I'd say that's what really compelled us this year, but wanted to get through those other priorities first. That's not to say we're not doing anything for teachers this year. We supported the budget recommendation that had been put forward to the superintendent that has additional discretionary dollars and even some pay for student teachers, for example. But facilities was the biggest unmet need and where we put our limited resources on the table as a priority this year.
Great. Thank you for expanding on that. We really appreciate it. Well, we got through a few questions. We really appreciate your time being here and everything that you and all the other folks that contribute to this process. We're really grateful for it, and we're looking forward to working with you during the session, and we'll see what comes out of it.
For sure. And thank you, Tori. Thank you to the Boise Metro Chamber team. Your voice goes a long way with the legislature, and we've appreciated your partnership more than you know. So thank you very much for having me.
Well, we really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Just a real quick thank you to our sponsor, Optum Idaho. We really appreciate your support of the Chamber as well. And along with our media partners, we have Idaho Ed News, Idaho Capital Sun, Idaho Press, and Idaho Statesman. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.